Wonderful to be here on this stage, seeing the energy in this room. I know you had an intense morning, a fun morning, a productive morning. And now we have Meghan here to talk a little bit about what you have been doing and her thoughts about things relating to this process. So thank you this morning for doing the opening remarks when you talked about how you believe we can leverage differences to achieve improvements. And what your colleagues have done here all morning is actually to exploring that. They have mapped aspects of their personal selves, of their professional selves, and used those facets to solve problems, come to insights. And it's a process we call bring your whole self to work. And the basic principle is that there are things we don't think of as work-related that can be helpful to our professional tasks. So when I say that phrase to you, Meghan, like bring your whole self to work, what does it mean to you? And how do you think it can have a positive impact on the college when people do that? If we start the conversation there.
Sure, of course. So happy afternoon, everybody. I really enjoyed this morning. I got to sit at a table over here, and I hope the Medici group, I hope my table doesn't get sort of points taken away, but we seem to already go in a new direction. So we had 4 members of the facilities team from Lincoln at our table, and as I attempted to see whether we might want to reconfigure our table, Maxwell said, listen, I'm here because my partner Elias is really new on the team, and it's my job to sort of take care of him at this first PDD day, and that seemed like a really good answer. So we kept the table. Second thing I'll say before I answer the question, I once heard a professor of neuroscience say, if you're presenting somewhere and it's a day-long conference, do whatever it takes not to be the first panel after lunch. So with that in mind, I know we're going to have this fireside chat, and then we're going to get back into the work of the tables, and I'm really looking forward to doing that. So now to the question of bring your whole selves to work. I'm actually going to start with 2 conversations that I had this morning. One right before the remarks began, and then one right as we were moving to the table. And while I won't reveal the identity of the 2 folks I'm talking about, I can tell you that one is a faculty member and one is a staff member. And what struck me is we could have been talking about 1,000 things. We could have been talking about the work that each of us is doing. We could have been talking about the stress that we feel about that work or the pleasure. But in fact, in both conversations, the only thing we talked about was something going on in their families. And I think about that. So as we move now to this question of bringing your whole selves to work, I know some of you in this room really well. There are some of you I know not at all. And I think I will speak for myself. I don't have an at-home person and a work person. I'm just a person. And for those who work really close to me, they know what that means. It means I'm a mother for sure. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister, and I'm a wife. And those things remain part of my life when I'm here. Where is Deb? There's Deb. Deb is probably the person in my life at this college who is closest to my family life. And boy, does it say a lot about her compassion and her trustworthiness that one of my practices is I don't have my phones on the table when I'm meeting with anybody. I find it distracting, and I know I find it distracting when I'm sitting at a table with someone and their phone is there. So Deb is the keeper of my phones, and we have an agreement of what that looks like. And depending on what's going on in my family life, Deb is going to have to find a way to get me a message, and in some cases, come to get me. I will tell you a happy story along those lines. 2 commencements ago, it was our last commencement at the field house. I have one daughter, and my daughter was in her biggest game of the season. She's a lacrosse player, and all of us who are parents know we have these moments in our professional lives where we absolutely cannot be there. And if you have a 17-year-old daughter, I mean, I say this with love, you know, for her, the game mattered more than this college's commencement, for her. She certainly understood where I needed to be and accepted that. So here's what we did. Deb, I think it was Deb's creativity. Deb designed a system. She sat in the front row, so you could only see it if you were right there. And she had 2 pads of paper. The left pad was my daughter's school, and the right pad was the opponent's school, and she updated the score through the entire commencement. And I don't, you know, it may sound like a trivial thing, but actually for me, it made me feel like I was able to both meet my responsibilities to our students and to this faculty and staff and be fully here, and also actually meet my obligation to my daughter. You know, she had 1 shot to play that game, and I needed to be able to come home that night and say, you know, I watched that game, I watched that score, and I was cheering as it happened. When I think about this concept of whole self, and I think about the team that is closest to me, and I think probably everyone in this college knows who that is. It is people like Deb, it's Jackie, it's Peter Bardsley. You know, I know their lives. I will share with you and then I'm gonna have people raise your hand. How many people know that Deb Zielinski used to be a race car driver, actually a race car driver, right? So who wouldn't want that skill on your team? And here's the thing, I've actually benefited from that skill, as you might imagine. I know that Jackie is a brand new grandmother and is, I think the only word is besotted with Scarlett, her first grandchild. And I guess I'll just say this, Alix Ogden is not here with us today, and she allowed me to share with you where she is, which is her father's funeral. And I will tell you, I spoke with someone this morning who's a member of our faculty. I wish I could be in 2 places. I feel like I should be in New York, and I know I need to be here. So I committed to Alix that I would share with this community, and there are some of you who know her well. Boy, did she want to be here, and I'm really counting on this room to take care of her when she returns on Monday. So. How do I think about it? I think people in this room have remarkable skills and remarkable talents, and you use them all the time in your home lives. And on your own teams, you watch how you bring those skills and those talents to your teams, and I think it for sure makes us a stronger college.
Thank you, Meghan. Yes, thank you. There were many things in your story, but I picked up one that I found interesting, because this was a story of innovation. I don't know if you heard that, but the fact that you cared about your daughter's game made Deb innovate with the pads. That's a pretty smart idea. Yeah. And if you hadn't cared, if you had said, work is work, that's something else, I need to focus on this, that idea would never have come up. Yeah. So this is an example of us caring about our own selves, our personal lives, our children, makes us better at work. Because that solution, I think, if it comes from race car or not, I don't know, but I'm sure that is useful for other things as well. So I think it's a great example.
Thank you.
When we get the question, we do this dynamic many times, and similar exercises with groups of people. I love that you started talking about this morning, what happened already before this workshop session started, because we sometimes get the feedback when we put people at tables with individuals they never work with, and they have breakfast together. We haven't even started. We have a whole day of work ahead of us. We haven't even started yet. Sometimes people say, this is a great workshop. This is so productive. And like, you're only having breakfast. But you have breakfast with people you don't usually eat with, and that creates a different conversation from what you usually have. Do you recognize that today? So sometimes it is that simple. And I heard someone say, an insight from this is that I need to go to the other campuses more because this was great, just to have the conversation with that person. But we do get the question, how do you accomplish this? How do you bring your whole selves to work? And now one answer I have, and I will admit now that it's not a fully functional answer. I say, try to make sure that you have conversations about other things than work. And people nod and say, that's really interesting, I'll try to do that. But when I say that, I simplify dramatically, because it's very easy to have conversations about other things than work when you talk to someone that you have a lot in common with. Someone else whose kid plays lacrosse, easy conversation will probably occur just like that. But when we are more different and the gain, the potential improvement is so much greater, then we have a harder time having that conversation. So that's why it's a tension. The conversations outside of work that we should have are the ones we don't end up having, because we don't just get them. And when I talked to you, Meghan, before, it sounds like you feel CCRI is a great place to actually be a little bit more ambitious and bold in that regard. Can you say a little bit more about that? Why this is a good arena, a good context?
Sure. You know, the planning committee for this day found you. I hadn't heard of the Medici Group. And as the planning went on and what was brought into my office, and I'm paraphrasing, was we want to try something that we haven't done before. And we want to try something where there are many more people sitting in front of us, the two of us, and less people talking for hours at a time, and much more people talking amongst themselves. And so when I think about what I hope comes out of today, it is very simple. It's not particularly elevated or complex. It's that people will remember the surprises that came out of conversations with people they may not have known before sitting down at a table today, and will decide to prioritize, even if it's just one person that you met today. I really do understand the amount of work that is underway at this college, and particularly this time of year. So if folks can at least set this goal, I'm going to try to hold on to one new person that I sat down at my table and I got to know, and I'm going to figure out a way to stay connected to that person. Now, I, of course, have many members of the Lincoln facilities, so I've got to figure out how we'll do that. What do I think? I think we have to begin to really know each other to build that trust in order to then go on to have, I think, more intimate conversations where we reveal, you know, I told you, with the exception of Elise, I told you happy stories, right? There are a lot of really painful stories that my team and all of our teams have gone through and are going through. I think as you build trust, it becomes more natural, and you can see a way through to bringing your whole self and not just telling the happy stories, telling some painful stories. And I think as a college and as an institution, you know, I was really struck. I saw Jude earlier. He's right there. Look, we absolutely, as a community, must figure out how we talk to each other better. And for me, that means a couple of things. It means more directly, and by that I mean less filtering. So more directly, and more than anyone else, I own that. I need to figure out with our teams and with your teams how we do that. I also think we need to think about how we do it with kindness. And it doesn't mean kindness is the beginning and the end. It does mean, I think, it's the ground. So how do we have conversations that the foundation is kindness, is truly empathetic listening? You know, one of the, I think, simplest pieces of advice I've ever been given, when you think about a conflict that you have with someone, whether it's your family or someone at work, there's this phrase, you know, I need to go have a talk with them, or I need to go talk with them. Actually, I think what we need to do is go and just listen with full empathy. Do that first, and then see where you get. And so when I think about today, what gives me hope and what gives me optimism is that we can begin this work of trust, and in many cases of rebuilding trust, and that trust will allow us to go forward and have conversations that I know will continue to move this college forward.
Thank you. I believe all the things you said are going to be more and more important, because we will have more and more diversity at this college, at every workplace where your students will be after this college. That's just the way the society is developing. And speaking of that, there are a couple of new initiatives where Rhode Island is actually pioneering. I'm talking about Rhode Island Promise and Guided Pathways. And the essence or the objective of these are to give access to higher education to wider groups of students, in a nutshell. Which, from our lens, sounds like, yes, great, more diversity. So what do you think are the biggest benefits of programs like that for CCRI?
Yeah, it's an important question. If you live in Rhode Island, this is particularly the Rhode Island Promise has been probably the topic that the college has been most associated with in the last couple of years. I guess I'd start with the most sort of obvious thing, and I just got done talking with some folks who support our Promise students and all of our students. You know, the most important thing is we are serving hundreds more students than we otherwise would have served without the Promise. So we have seen the enrollment of that cohort of our students double. And I think we will go on to see it continue to grow at a slower pace, but to continue to grow. So the first thing that matters as a Rhode Islander is we are providing outstanding learning and an outstanding education for people who are never going to get that. So I think that's enormously significant and has very obvious implications for the future workforce of the state of Rhode Island. When I think about guided pathways, it is one of the initiatives that has been brought into this college, really by the entire college, that I'm the most excited about. And I'm the most excited about it, I guess, because it seems it is so clear. It provides clarity where we need it. It is going to enable our students, I think, to find their way much more easily into the classrooms that they will much more quickly find they belong. I think we will retain them at a significantly higher retention rate, and then of course go on to graduate them. When I think about those initiatives, when I think about, there are so many that I'm so proud of that this college has done, but when I think about the food pantry, when I think about the Math Emporium, you know, maybe I'll start with the food pantry. Food insecurity increasingly across higher ed institutions in this country is becoming talked about. And it's a growing problem, not a shrinking problem. That is acutely true in the community college space. And I know many of you know, right? 1 out of every 4 of our students routinely faces food insecurity. And if you're a student of color at this institution, it's 6 out of 10. So this, you know, what I think one of the assets this community has over perhaps more conventional four-year institutions. This community has been tackling these kinds of questions since the day we opened our doors. And so when I think about what took place to make it actually launch here, it took Dean Kristian Jenkins, she was is she here?
See someone waving.
There she is. I say this with affection, a dog with a bone. Like, she was not gonna let us take our eye off of how much this matters.
So when you describe initiatives like this one, great example, I see a connection to our previous topic about bringing your whole selves to work.
Yeah.
Because that is about bringing your passions, your values, your preferences, your beliefs, and doing something with it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this initiative and many others are dependent on an individual or a few individuals feeling strongly about something.
Yeah.
And feeling empowered to do something
Yes.
with that passion.
Yes.
So it sounds like an example that you are successful in this workplace to allow people to bring the whole self to work, and it makes a difference in terms of improvement and new ideas. Would you?
So gosh, I would say probably the most honest response I can give to that is I don't believe that every single person sitting in this room is bringing their whole self. It feels they are able to bring their whole self to this space every day. So I'd be curious, I wish we had time to, maybe we will at the end, sort of get some responses from people in the room. What would I suppose, and I'd be curious what you would say. You know, Elias has been here. How long have you been here, Elias? How many weeks? Yeah, 9 weeks. So who's been here 30 years? Yeah, so Joanne, I see Joanne's hand. I don't know that this is true, but I'm gonna suppose that they probably don't have the same answer. And I'm going to suppose that there's a variety of reasons of why that's true. I guess I would say it's what do we aspire to? I aspire to what you said. I want us to get there. I think some of us in this room are here. I don't think as an entire community.
Because there are more ideas that can be had. There are more initiatives that can be started if people feel that, yeah, this is an idea I have and I can actually bring it.
And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that idea of trust. I think for good work to be done, there has to be trust.
And I would say the most common reasons for why things sometimes don't happen is because the first conversation is never even had.
Yeah.
Because you carry this idea with you and you don't know who to talk to, and because how will they react, etc. Is this really my job?
Yeah.
So I think that is the dynamic that you can kind of address with the notion of bringing your whole self to work.
Well, the only thing I would respond to that, boy, I would love people to feel that they do not need to, I'm looking at our HR team. If you have a good idea, bring it to the person who you think is going to help you develop that good idea. And I hope that that's your direct manager, and I hope that that person will get on board. And boy, I hope we can make this organization feel flatter than it might feel. I think we need every good idea that we can find from every single person in this room.
Thank you. The last topic I want to bring up is this idea of thinking more explicitly of diversity inclusion as a strategy, as a way to improve whatever it is you need to improve. We see around the world that the conversation about diversity inclusion is changing. Going from it is the right thing to do, which we all probably agree it is, but taking it one step further. It's not only the right thing to do, it's actually the thing that can help us do things better. We see it in different types of organizations, we see it in different parts of the world. I will argue, not being American, that America is on the forefront in this whole conversation, but Europe is waking up, other places are waking up, the conversation is changing. So how do you think, there are different ways to talk about this, like for faculty, for staff, also for students, why is diversity good? But let's start high level. What do you think higher education in general can benefit from more diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I slipped away. I had to do a similar thing on a panel at Brown earlier today with a group of university presidents actually from around the world.
So this is your second panel?
It's my, I feel like I have 2 weddings I need to be at today. And where's Peter Bardsley? Actually, we could have 2 race car drivers because Peter did not trust me to actually get there and back on my own. So thank you, Peter. I sat in that room with folks, I was the only representative from a community college, which I think is notable in terms of how I would describe conventional higher ed thinks about itself, and perhaps there's some growth that needs to be done. And as I sat listening, I thought about the significant advantage that this faculty and that this staff has over what I would describe as more conventional four-year institutions. And I genuinely mean that. 40% of our students are students of color. Nearly 2/3 are low-income students receiving financial aid. We have students from around the world. We have professors and staff from around the world. We've been doing this since we opened our doors in 1964. Now, do we have further growth that we can go on to do? For sure we do. I do, though, think as a body, community colleges have a great deal to teach the rest of America and America higher ed how to do this work well. Now, as to where I would like us to see us move, I'll be directionally correct, and Elizabeth may have the number right at her fingertips, but you know, we have, if we have 40% of our student body are students of color, I want to see us becoming even more intentional with how we diversify our faculty. I think the number of faculty of color is 7. Yeah, so full-time faculty at 7%. And here's the thing, before we start beating up on ourselves and asking kind of how we have failed, we haven't failed. This challenge is endemic to higher ed. And so what have we decided to do about it? I think we've decided to do a couple of things and attack it, I hope, from a variety of angles, and we continue to need good ideas from this room. the first thing that we've done is hire our first ever director of institutional equity. We did that 3 years ago. We hadn't had one before. I think it says a lot about where you decide to prioritize your resources and where you have that person report. So that person was hired, reported directly to me. We then are in the process of redesigning how we think about HR. So we now have Elizabeth installed as our new AVP of Human Resources and Institutional Equity. So what has she been charged with? What has the team been charged with? One of the things she's been charged with is how we intentionally build a plan to diversify our faculty. So that's about how do we think about bringing new people in, right? What do we do with the people who are already here? And I've spent the last 3 years talking with Leslie and talking now with Jude. How do we think about taking care of the people who are already here? So how do we invest in the people who are already here, and how do we do it in a way that makes them feel like they can bring their whole selves to work, that they are valued, and that they can be part of a broader conversation? We've got our culture task force. We have our first ever diversity, inclusion, and equity committee. That's never existed before. They're working right now to build their plan. I think that's something that they will be looking to this entire room to respond to give feedback to, and to help us think about what kind of team do you want to be on? How do you want to think about growing at this institution? And what do you need? What do you need from me? What do you need from HR? What do you need from your teammates? And finally, I think actually everyone in this room already has a developed understanding of why diversity matters. And so I think we're starting at a strong place, and all we need to do is keep going and keep moving. Fundamentally, though, we educate students. And why does it matter that we actually are a diverse people? It matters because there are just thousands of pages of data that tell us students perform better when they come into a classroom or they come into an institution and they actually see people who look like them, and they have a way to find a story that they can connect to so they feel like they belong.
So it's a matter of feeling safe, feeling secure, and again, being more comfortable talking about yourself. You also said something when we talked that we know how to meet students where they are. Like you said, that's a challenge you've had since you opened your doors, because you have arguably a greater variation in backgrounds than some other colleges and higher institutions, higher education institutions, which to us is a great example of how diversity actually makes you better. That is hard. Meeting students where they are is hard, especially if their variation is great. You have become forced to be good at that, which makes you better at that. You said we are at the cutting edge of this at least compared to many other very prestigious institutions, because it's tougher. And this is what tells us, okay, here you see diversity as an advantage because it makes you stronger. It makes you better. There are many organizations, both in education and in corporate, who see that struggle as something negative. It's a problem that needs to be solved, to come from a low level up to kind of zero to solve the problem. Whereas here you talk about it as this is a strength that makes us better than others. So this is a pedagogical challenge for us when we work with diversity and inclusion, to make organizations take that leap in understanding for what diversity and inclusion can be for them. So I wonder, do you have some advice to someone who believes that this is just a problem to solve? How do you make them understand, no, this is a way for you to get stronger and be able to deal with more different challenges in a faster moving future, a more diverse America, a more diverse world? Does that question make sense?
Yes, and that's a question I would love to go to the audience if we have time. I think where I would start just right away, first of all, I have a hard time identifying with that concept. I would make sure that person had an opportunity to sit down and do some genuinely empathetic listening to our students and then to our faculty and staff who represent diverse identities. And only after that was done, then begin to ask questions and provide, sort of context from where that person was sitting. I think just my sense is folks that have that reaction as sort of a cerebral or intellectual, this is a problem we have to solve, I wonder what their contact has been with folks that aren't exactly like they are.
Well, many of these groups that I talk about are pretty homogeneous. So that's part of, like you said, that is part of the problem. As a last thing before we're going to ask from the room questions to Meghan as well. Can you say a little bit more about that classroom? When you come to that classroom and that is diverse, it'll make students better. Because my previous question was about staff, but the students, they see
Sure.
They feel more at home, yes. They feel more safe, yes. But what is it in that dynamic, according to you, that also makes the learning situation more dynamic?
Absolutely. I have a group of students that I see monthly, and I'm immediately thinking of one of them. And she's an adult student, as you all know, the majority of our students are, and she'd been out of school for a long time. So why it matters, and this is truer for community college students than it is for students at other colleges, particularly for first-generation students, and you all know this. When they are first coming here, they're sitting in their car, they don't actually think they belong, and they don't think they should come through the doors. So the biggest first thing they have to do is like undo their seatbelt, open the door of their car, and find their way through. And so when I think about the people here, you are the front lines. So it is you who are going to make the difference and help that student begin to believe that she does belong here, or actually reconfirm what she's been told for the first, 25 or 30 years of her life, which is she's not college material, she doesn't belong here, and she should just go back to her car. So here's the story. She came in, she was in chemistry class. She hadn't been in a chemistry class in almost 15 years. And she found it really challenging. For any of our chemistry professors, that would be a tough thing to walk back into a chemistry class. In fact, her instructor may be here, I don't know. And you'll remember this story. She was overwhelmed. She asked a question. The way the professor heard the question was that somehow the student was challenging sort of the pedagogy. And what the student eventually said was like, I just haven't been in a classroom like this in 15 years. I really want to learn, and I'm trying to figure out how to find my way in. And everything changed. The professor, as my student tells it, that student only made it through that class, that semester, because the professor sat right beside her, made sure she felt comfortable, helped her find her way to asking the right questions, stayed with her late after class, and the rest is history. She's now a STEM major. She's transferring to URI when she graduates this spring. And I think about that professor, and I think about her ability to quickly pivot and realize, wait a second, there's a history here. I need to take a minute to sort of recognize that, and I need to find a way to open a space so she can find her way truly into my classroom, and she did it brilliantly. And I know that happens every day here.
That is a phenomenal story because it actually wraps up all the things we talked about. This is a person who brought her whole self here and told the truth about what it was, a professor who followed the passion of helping that student. And also you pointed at something that we haven't talked about that is very important. When we talk about diversity, our experience, to make people understand the value of diversity, they have to understand diversity is so much more than we usually think about. Yes, age, gender, ethnicity, all those things, but also first-generation students.
Yeah.
That is something we can't look at someone and see that it matters greatly. That is diversity. That is a new perspective that adds something. 9 weeks or 30 years, that is diversity. That gives you different viewpoints.
Exactly.
This mix of insights, when that come together, you just become better at figuring out the next step quickly. That's the biggest benefit we see of this. And I think many of the things you said kind of touched upon that in different ways. So Meghan, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And I'm going to thank you.
Thank you, everybody.